Courtrooms are supposed to be cold, quiet, and controlled. But on this day, everything changed the moment that audio started playing. The room fell into a breathless silence. All eyes locked on Diddy as a voice from the past echoed through, the speakers sending shockwaves through everyone present. It wasn't just another piece of evidence. This was the clip nobody was supposed to hear. And the moment it played, Diddy's entire demeanor shifted. His jaw clenched, his eyes welled up, and for a split second, it looked like the music mogul, known for commanding every room he walks into, was about to completely lose control. Reporters couldn't tweet fast enough. Attorneys were whispering like wildfire. The judge even called for a brief recess just to let the room breathe. What was on that tape? Who recorded it? And how did it manage to shake Diddy, a man who's faced scandals, betrayals, and court battles before, to his core? Fans are still scrambling for answers, but insiders say what happened next behind those courtroom doors was even more explosive. From old friends turning into enemies to shocking confessions that rewrote everything we thought we knew. This isn't just another celebrity trial. This is the unraveling of a legacy. And you're not ready for what's about to be revealed. It started with a whisper behind closed doors, a rumor that something unexpected was about to drop in the middle of Diddy's ongoing courtroom battle. No one outside the inner circle knew what the prosecution had up their sleeve, but everyone in the building could feel it. A shift in the energy, a tension that curled around the corners of the marble halls like smoke before a fire. This wasn't just about lawsuits or legal tactics anymore. Something personal was coming, something raw. And the moment the judge granted permission to introduce new audio evidence, you could hear the buzz ripple through the room like an electric current. Diddy sat motionless, flanked by his legal team, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him, lips pressed tight, hands folded like he was bracing himself for impact. Across the aisle, the prosecution rose, nodding to the technician who rolled a small speaker system to the center. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. The moment the audio began, the room went silent. It started quietly, the sound of a door opening, some muffled movement, then a voice. Unmistakable. It was Diddy's. Not from a press conference, not from a performance. This was behind closed doors, stripped of glamour, stripped of control. Don't walk out that door, his voice echoed, low and tight with anger. You walk out, and you know what happens. The room tensed. People leaned forward, jaws slack. Diddy's head dropped ever so slightly. Another voice responded, this time a woman's, shaking, emotional. I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. A slam, a crash, then silence. The judge paused the audio, turning to both sides. This material is emotionally charged, she warned. We'll proceed with caution. But the damage was done. Even with just a few seconds of playback, the atmosphere inside the courtroom had changed. It wasn't about image anymore. It was about power, fear, truth. Diddy's attorney scrambled, objecting to context, chain of custody, and relevance. But the prosecution was prepared. They claimed the recording was part of a longer file recovered from an old phone once used by a former assistant. And that assistant, who had remained unnamed throughout the early proceedings, was now scheduled to testify. Outside the courtroom, fans were in a frenzy. Social media lit up like a match to dry leaves. Phrases like the audio, the voice, and Diddy exposed began trending globally. But inside, the heat was just beginning to rise. The assistant, identified in court records as Marcus J, had worked with Diddy for nearly 6 years during the peak of his career resurgence. Known for handling everything from tour logistics to private meetings, Marcus had seen and heard it all. And now, after years of silence, he was ready to talk. As Marcus took the stand, the air turned heavy. Even Diddy looked up now, his eyes locked on the man he once trusted to run his empire's engine. But Marcus wasn't the same nervous aide he once was. He looked calm, deliberate, and when he began to speak, the courtroom leaned in. There were a lot of things I kept to myself back then, Marcus began. Hey, things I saw, things I heard, things that I knew weren't right. He glanced toward Diddy, then back at the jury. But that night, that recording, that wasn't the first time something like that happened. It was just the only time. Someone captured it. He described nights where arguments would spiral into shouting matches, where hotel rooms were turned upside down, where women were escorted out in tears while staff looked the other way. He talked about a culture of silence, where loyalty was currency and speaking out meant losing everything. We were taught not to ask questions. Just keep the music playing, keep the brand strong. Diddy's attorneys attempted to undermine Marcus's credibility, citing past financial disputes and a non-disclosure agreement he had allegedly violated by testifying. But Marcus didn't flinch. "I signed that paper when I thought loyalty was mutual," he said. "Now I know better." And then just when the courtroom thought they'd heard enough, Marcus pulled out his own phone. "This," he said, "is from a conversation I recorded the day after that audio clip was made. It's between me and one of the security guards who was there. The judge reviewed it, then allowed it to play." "He lost it, man," the voice said, clearly rattled. "I thought he was gonna hit the wall or something." She locked herself in the bathroom. As the audio played, Diddy shifted in his seat. His jaw tightened, his foot began to tap. But the most devastating moment came at the end of the clip, when the security guard added quietly, "He's not the man people think he is." Gasps spread through the courtroom. Someone in the back wiped away a tear. Others just stared, stunned. The day ended in chaos. Paparazzi swarmed outside the building. Fans screamed Diddy's name, some in support, some in outrage. People wanted answers. They wanted truth. But more than anything, they wanted to know how much of what they'd worshipped for years had been a lie. As the team escorted Diddy out the back entrance, one reporter shouted, "Did you say those words on the tape?" Diddy didn't answer. He didn't have to. The look on his face said everything. The court adjourned for the day, but the streets were still buzzing. Inside hotel rooms and Ubers and corner booths of restaurants all across the city, people were out talking, not just about the trial, but about who they had been supporting all these years. And somewhere in the shadows, more voices were preparing to come forward. People who had stayed silent for years. People who thought no one would listen. People who had stories they were finally ready to tell. Because once the first tape plays, the rest always follow. The morning after the courtroom chaos, the world woke up different. It wasn't just another celebrity scandal now. It was personal. The headlines were everywhere. Diddy's court breakdown goes viral. New audio rocks courtroom. And former assistant testifies against music mogul. Everyone had an opinion, from Hollywood insiders to longtime fans. But while the public was glued to their screens, inside the courtroom, the fire was far from dying down. Diddy arrived that day surrounded by even more security. His face was tight, expression unreadable, lips pressed into a thin line. The glitz and glamour usually surrounding him had faded. No entourage, no shades, no signature smirk. He looked like a man cornered. Inside, the energy had shifted too. Even those who once whispered support in hushed tones were now sitting straighter, quieter, unsure. The judge, clearly aware of the magnitude this case was taking on, ordered tighter procedures. "This courtroom is not a circus," she warned. But the truth was the spotlight was already too bright to dim. Proceedings resumed with another bombshell, this time from a different angle. Cassie's longtime friend and former stylist, known in court as Laura B., took the stand. Her voice was soft, her tone measured, but the words she delivered were sharp as glass. "I saw it all," she said. The bruises, the excuses, the fear she tried to mask. The courtroom stilled. She'd come to fittings late, sometimes with her sunglasses on indoors. One time, she flinched when I reached out to adjust her sleeve, and she never flinched. Lara described moments that didn't need cameras or audio, moments that lived in between the lines. The kind people dismiss until it's too late. She talked about whispered phone calls, the nights Cassie stayed at her apartment just to get away, and the endless emotional roller coaster that played out behind closed doors. When asked why she hadn't spoken out sooner, Laura lowered her gaze. "Because I was scared." Because she was scared. Because when someone like him is involved, you don't know who's listening. This moment changed everything. It wasn't just about one explosive piece of audio anymore. It was a pattern. A story building itself brick by brick from voices that had once been silent. And Diddy, who once stood untouchable, was now being surrounded by shadows of his past. The defense tried to poke holes in her story, asking about timelines, inconsistencies, and her own motives. But Laura stood her ground. "I gained nothing from this," she said firmly, "except maybe peace." And then, as if the courtroom needed any more fuel, the prosecution dropped the next twist. surveillance footage from a private hallway in a high-rise apartment building. The date matched the night of the original audio. Though the footage had no sound, the visuals were chilling. It showed Cassie, visibly distressed, rushing into the hallway barefoot, holding what appeared to be her phone and purse. Seconds later, Diddy followed, shirt untucked, yelling, motioning toward her. He never touched her in the video, but his posture, his gestures, the intensity, it was enough. The room collectively inhaled. This, the prosecutor said, is the moment. She tried to leave. The defense objected, of course, claimed there was no context, no audio, no proof of intent, but the jury had seen enough. And so had the people watching online. Social media blew up again. Fans posted side-by-sides of Diddy's old interviews. His motivational quotes, his brand-building speeches, all contrasted against these new allegations. Influencers weighed in. Celebrities who once performed with him remained silent, while others began quietly removing collaborations from their pages. One tweet went viral. "We danced to his hits while women suffered in silence." As the courtroom battle raged on, more names began to surface, people from his past, artists, assistants, dancers, all with stories, some subtle, some explosive. The narrative was growing faster than anyone could contain. Behind the scenes, Diddy's team was scrambling. Damage control meetings, legal strategy calls, even rumored offers for private settlements began circulating, though his reps denied. Them! But the public wasn't buying silence anymore. They wanted accountability, and while all of this unraveled, Cassie remained unseen. No statements, no appearances. But her absence only amplified the weight of what others were saying on her behalf. On the third day of the trial, Diddy's legal team decided to call an unexpected witness. His longtime bodyguard, known in court as Mike D. Tall. Built like a wall, Mike had been with Diddy for over a decade. He stepped into the witness box with the confidence of someone who had seen it all and kept it buried. But when asked directly if he'd ever seen Diddy act aggressively, Mike hesitated, just for a second. But it was long enough. There were moments, he said finally, where things got out of hand. "Can you be more specific?" the attorney asked. "Heated arguments, shouting, door slamming. But I wasn't in the room all the time. I just heard things." "Did you ever see him hurt anyone?" "Pause, not with my own eyes," he replied. "But I heard enough to know it wasn't good." The courtroom stirred. Jurors scribbled. Diddy for the first time looked shaken, because now even his own people were slipping. And that was the thing about a legacy built on power. Once it starts to crack, it shatters fast. As the third day spilled into the fourth, tension in the courtroom reached a fever pitch. No one was sure what was coming next, but everyone knew it wasn't over. The testimonies had shaken the foundation, the video had shifted public opinion, and now, with even Diddy's inner circle starting to show signs of fracture, the prosecution was ready to strike again. They had one more surprise witness. The judge allowed it after reviewing a sealed motion submitted overnight. Murmurs filled the courtroom. Who could it be? Who hadn't already spoken that would carry this much weight? Then the doors opened and jaws dropped. Usher Raymond. Yes, Usher. Not as a celebrity guest or a supporter, but as someone who had seen too much and stayed quiet for too long. As Usher took the stand, Diddy's entire body language changed. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and stared, not with anger, but with something closer to disbelief, maybe even betrayal. Usher didn't. Look at him. Not once. His voice was calm, but beneath every word was attention, the kind that comes from years of knowing and never saying a word. There were times, Usher began, when we were in the same places, running in the same circles, and there were things I saw, things I wish I'd spoken up about. He paused. We'd be backstage at events or after parties, and they'd be yelling. People would get sent away. Assistants would come running, trying to calm things down. Did you ever see him hurt someone? The prosecutor asked. Usher looked straight ahead. I saw fear, real fear, on people's faces, and I saw how they were taught to smile through it, pretend everything was fine. Because if you said something, you didn't come back. The courtroom was dead silent. I should have said something earlier, Usher added quietly. Maybe if more of us had spoken up, this wouldn't have gone so far. Diddy's attorney objected, claiming emotional manipulation and irrelevance, but the judge allowed it. Character context, she ruled. And Usher, a man of carefully crafted image, had just delivered a character blow that shook the room. Outside the courtroom, fans were reeling. Some felt betrayed. Others felt vindicated. Social media went into overdrive. Usher broke the silence, trended for hours. Talk shows dissected his every word. Even those who had once turned away from the trial tuned back in, wondering, if Usher saw it, how many others knew? And just when it seemed like the day had peaked, another twist unraveled. Leaked emails, obtained by an anonymous source. The emails allegedly showed exchanges between Diddy's legal team and multiple individuals attempting to secure silence through financial offers, large sums, confidentiality agreements, attempts to erase digital trails. The prosecution, carefully navigating legal boundaries, submitted them as circumstantial evidence, tying them back to known dates of incidents referenced by witnesses. Though not conclusive, they painted a picture of a man desperately trying to keep the truth buried. We're looking at a pattern, the prosecutor argued. Not just of abuse, but of cover-up. In the hallway during recess, reporters scrambled to update their stories. Some began reaching out to other former associates, bodyguards, artists, anyone who had even brushed shoulders with Diddy's empire. And while some stayed silent, others hinted they'd seen things too. The floodgates were beginning to creak. Meanwhile, Diddy's legal team tried to regroup. They called a psychologist to testify. Someone who had worked with Diddy in the past and was prepared to speak about his upbringing, his emotional state, and how fame had shaped him. The psychologist described a man driven by fear of loss, by pressure, by control. He was taught to never show weakness, she said, and that led to unhealthy behaviors. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore, because once a story gains momentum, it's no longer about defense, it's about public perception. And Diddy, the man who once seemed untouchable, was now at the center of a storm he could no longer spin. Back at home, the ripple effects began hitting close. Celebrities started quietly removing themselves from business ventures. Brands began distancing. Fans flooded old posts with comments, some supportive, others brutal. You lied to us. We believed in you. How could you? But the most haunting post came from someone still in the shadows. Cassie, a single photo. No caption, just her hand holding a candle. The symbolism was impossible to miss. The world wasn't waiting anymore, and neither was the truth. Day 5 began under a gray sky, as if even the weather had caught the weight of what was unfolding. By now, the courthouse wasn't just surrounded by reporters, it was surrounded by protesters, supporters, critics, and those who had once idolized Diddy and were now questioning everything they thought they knew. But inside, the drama had escalated to its final, most brutal chapter. Court resumed with a somber tone. The judge's voice was firmer, the jury quieter, and even the attorneys walked slower, aware that today's testimony could tip the scale for good. The prosecution called their final key witness, a woman named Sonia, a former music producer, who had worked under Diddy's label in the early 2000s. She hadn't spoken publicly in years. But now she was ready, and her testimony didn't just echo what had already been said, it pushed it even deeper. He controlled every inch of our lives, she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. Not just professionally, but personally. If you said no to anything, you were gone overnight, no warning, no explanation. Sonia spoke about a toxic environment behind the flashing lights, one where intimidation was woven into the culture. She recounted a specific night where she witnessed Diddy corner a female artist during a recording session. I heard yelling, something breaking, and when I tried to check on her afterwards, she wouldn't speak. She just cried and shook her head. The courtroom was frozen. We weren't just scared of losing our jobs, she continued. We were scared of him. As she spoke, Diddy's expression began to crack. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands covering his mouth. His legal The team tried to keep composure, but it was clear they hadn't expected her. The prosecutor asked, "Why come forward now?" Because watching this case unfold reminded me of how many people were hurt and how many of us stayed silent to survive. The jury stared, some with furrowed brows, some visibly shaken. The defense pushed back, calling her story exaggerated and emotionally manipulative. But the damage was already done. This wasn't just about one incident or one tape anymore. This was a pattern, a culture, a long dark shadow behind the success. And just when the prosecution wrapped, the courtroom was hit with a final unexpected turn. A woman in the back row, previously unnoticed by most, stood up. She was identified quickly as Janelle, a former background dancer who had toured with Diddy during his global campaign a decade ago. Her face wasn't famous, but her pain was real. She requested to speak under oath. The judge, after a tense legal sidebar, granted her request under limited testimony. Guidelines. When Janelle took the stand, she didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just told her truth. I was 17 when I joined that tour, she said. My first big break. I thought I was safe. I wasn't. She spoke about long nights, being told to attend after parties even when exhausted, being warned not to say no. We were told it was part of the job, that if Diddy asked you to show up somewhere, you didn't ask questions. Then she shared a chilling experience from one hotel in France. He called me to his suite to talk about choreography. I went because what else do you do when it's the boss? The courtroom held its breath. Nothing happened that night. She clarified. But the way he looked at me, the way he locked the door, I knew I wasn't there to talk about dance. And I was lucky to get out. Her voice cracked just once, but not all of us were lucky. The room went silent. The defense objected, but no one was listening anymore because outside the courtroom, the world had already moved ahead. Support pages for survivors were popping up. Diddy's music was being pulled from playlists. Event organizers were canceling his appearances. And inside, all that remained was the crumbling of a carefully built legacy. Diddy didn't speak, not once throughout the entire day. He just sat there, arms folded, eyes low. The man once known for running the world of hip-hop was now unable to run from his own truth. When the court adjourned, the judge announced that closing arguments would begin the next day. But everyone knew the real argument had already been made. Not through lawyers, but through the stories, through the women, through the cracks in Diddy's silence. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Chants echoed, voices rose, and as Diddy was ushered into a black SUV, his face hidden behind tinted windows, the last thing anyone saw was a hand pressed against the glass, still unsure, or maybe for the first time in his life. I'm powerless. The final day arrived like a slow drumbeat. By now, the courthouse wasn't just a legal arena, it was a cultural battleground. People weren't just watching the trial, they were watching history unfold. For decades, Diddy had been a symbol of success, swagger, and survival. But now, all of that had collided with something darker, something raw and unshakable. Inside the courtroom, the mood was thicker than ever. Jurors looked drained, reporters barely blinked, and even the security guard seemed to stand more alert than usual. Everyone knew today was the closing arguments. The moment everything would be tied together, every word dissected, and every silence suddenly made loud. The prosecution went first. Their lead attorney walked slowly to the center, not with arrogance, but with purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, this case is not just about one moment or one recording. It's about a man who built walls around himself so high that people were too afraid to look inside. He paused, letting the weight of that land. You've heard the stories. The yelling behind closed doors, the fear in the voices of women who were told to stay silent, the cover-ups, the payoffs, the silence, all to protect one name. He played one last clip, a snippet from the original audio, the same line that had started it all. Don't walk out that door. You walk out and you know what happens. The room held its breath. The prosecutor turned back to the jury. You know what happened, and now so does the world. He sat down, then came the defense. Their tone was different, less aggressive, more emotional. They painted Diddy as a flawed but pressured man, a visionary who came from nothing, carried an empire, and made mistakes under the weight of fame. We are not here to judge his music, the attorney said. We are not here to judge his image. We are here to look at facts. And the fact is, no one saw him hurt anyone with their own eyes. What you heard was emotion, not proof. He paced slowly, looking at the jury. Think about how many people rely on this man. Think about the lives he's changed, the families he's fed, the good he's done. Some jurors nodded slightly. Others remained stone-faced. He is not perfect, the attorney admitted, but he is not a monster. As he returned to his seat, the courtroom felt like it had been through a war. And in a way, it had. Not a war of fists or weapons, but of truths, lies, and the gray space in between. The judge gave final instructions to the jury, then called for a recess. As the jurors left to deliberate, the silence that followed was eerie. No whispers, no phones, just heavy breathing and staring eyes. Hours passed. Outside, the crowd had tripled. News anchors spoke in urgent tones. Fans held signs, some in support, some demanding justice. The world was holding its breath. And then the announcement: the jury has reached a verdict. Inside, people rushed back to their seats. Diddy returned to the courtroom, his face unreadable, hands folded, body still, as if bracing for whatever storm was coming next. The jury entered, the four-person stood, and the words that followed would change everything. We, the jury, find the defendant. But before the verdict could even be finished, Diddy closed his eyes. He knew. Maybe he had always known. What followed was chaos. People gasping, others crying, phones buzzing, voices rising, but Diddy didn't move. He just sat there, still, silent, a man who had run out of places to run. Outside, the crowd erupted, and somewhere in the distance, a familiar voice, a voice that had once been drowned out, whispered, "I told my truth." And this time, the world finally listened. So now that the verdict has been read, the masks have fallen and the silence is shattered. We're left with one question that echoes far beyond the courtroom walls. What happens next? For years, Diddy wasn't just a man, he was an empire, the face of resilience, the voice of the hustle. A mogul who told the world to vote or die, to take that, while building a legacy brick by brick. But behind the scenes, behind the music, behind the velvet curtains and VIP rooms, something much darker was brewing. And now, that darkness has been dragged into the light for all of us to see. Emotions ran high. Fans are still reeling. Some are angry, others are heartbroken. But no one's walking away untouched. Because this wasn't just about one tape, one trial, or even one man. This was about power, silence, protection, and the cost of looking the other way for too long. What happens to Diddy's legacy now? Do people separate the artist from the man? Or does the empire fall with its king? And where do we go from here? That's where you come in. What do you think about this trial? Do you believe the verdict was just... Do you think there are more voices still waiting to speak? Let us know in the comments. We're reading them all. If this story moved you, shocked you, or made you see things differently, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment when truth finally pushes through the noise. And turn on those notifications, because as you already know, this story might be over, but the consequences are just beginning. Until next time, stay aware, stay loud, and never stop asking the questions they hope you ignore. This is the truth behind the headlines, and we're just getting started.